night time, and a full moon is eclipsed as the shadow of the earth passes between the direct line of the sun and moon. Most seabirds nesting at this time of the year will have returned to their nesting sites, but some smaller birds, including the storm petrel, use darkness to cloak their approach and so escape predation by gulls. The Atlantic gannets of the Bull and Skellig rocks are large enough to escape predation, but smaller birds, including the puffin, are vulnerable. As morning approaches, ferry boats from the mainland villages of Portmagee, Ballinskelligs and this boat from Derrynane carry eager passengers to the Skellig. Whether it is to see the monastic settlement perched at the top of Skellig Michael, or the 50,000 gannets on nearby Small Skellig, each person has their own reason for visiting. Boats ferry people on and off the rock. As one vessel arrives, another departs back to the mainland. The beehive huts built by Christian monks from the 6th century onwards are reminders of a life spent in isolation, high above the rolling swell of the Atlantic below. But as man has been and gone, it is the nesting bird life of the Skellig that has probably occupied the sandstone ledges for millennia. And this is why I am here, to investigate the relationship between the Atlantic gannet, its prey consisting of mackerel, herring and sprat, and common dolphins, all of which fly or swim along County Kerry's wild Atlantic Way. At the gannetry, it is hunger and the need to feed developing chicks that drive the adults out to sea in search of food. No one will ever know if a gannet predetermines where it goes when looking for food. They continually search vast areas of open ocean, looking for flashes of silver through the water, a sure sign that fish are present. From my experience, it seems that gannets have learned to associate with dolphins. I spotted this group of common dolphins consisting of adults and juveniles in outer Kenmare Bay, situated halfway between the Bull and the Skellig rocks. Arising at 5:30 each morning, I headed out in ideal conditions, searching for pods. These journeys took me to the Blaskets, the Skelligs, the Bull Rock and back again, covering about 120 kilometers per trip. While I cannot be sure that I met the same group each day, I had no trouble finding them, and when I did, I made sure not to harass them. Instead, I adopted a pull-back and follow approach. For their part, the dolphins just got on with whatever they were doing. It was at this stage that I noticed the gannet association. Flying high above, they were keeping an eye on the dolphins below. Sometimes, and for no apparent reason, the pod I was with would take off. Perhaps they heard a communique from a distant pod. Food. There's food to be had. I'll never know, but my instinct was to take off with them and let them take me to wherever they were going. What I did notice is that as they journeyed, they were joined by more and more dolphins. Looking above, I could also see that more gannets were joining in. This was really getting exciting. Eventually, in the distance, I could see hundreds of gannets wheeling in the sky and diving into the water below. Was this where the dolphins were taking me? It certainly seemed so. By the time I arrived, there were many more dolphins corralling fish to the surface. The gannets were having a feast. Eventually, I decided to get into the water. By now, the dolphins ignored me, and as I slipped over the side of my boat, I moved towards the action. Dolphins were everywhere. I could see the bubbles from the net they were making. I was now right in the center of their feeding frenzy. It did not take long, perhaps 5 minutes or so, until this action came to an end. I guess this is why natural history is so hard to capture on film. For close on 10 days and in ideal conditions, I had searched the wild Atlantic of County Kerry just so I might be able to film this sequence. As I surfaced, I noticed the gannets were on the move again. Climbing back into the boat, I moved too. In fact, by now we were all on the move. Again, I didn't know where we were going. And this is my point about wildlife. It is always defined by where it can find its next food source, no matter where it has to go. By now, I was feeling like I really was part of this incredible wildlife event. Except that in my case, I was just a visitor. I could go home, have a hot shower, a nice meal and climb into bed. Not so for the dolphins or for the gannets. The action moved from the Skelligs to offshore Skelligs and into Derrynane Bay. The sea state had changed. The wind and waves were on the up. This time, a smaller group brought fish to the surface, and it allowed for much closer observation and recording of dolphins and gannets working together. My mind wandered back to the gannets. By now, many had full bellies and were probably on their way back to the nest sites at Small Skellig and the Bull Rock to feed their partners in single chick. Amongst the thousands of gannets on each rock, I wondered how individuals returning from fishing could recognise each other. I concentrated on filming one individual, and over time it began to sky point. This is used in mutual affection and bonding, but in this case it seems that the bird I was looking at was following its mate flying across the way. Could it be that they recognise each other from these distances? It certainly looks like this gannet is following something flying. Perhaps it is his mate. As I left all of this wild adventure behind, I could not believe how privileged I was to get so close to both dolphins and gannets. I clearly saw how one species that hunts for fish beneath the surface of the ocean is followed by aerial opportunists, the gannets, who wait until the hard work is done and dive into a veil of an easy meal. This is just one incredible encounter along County Kerry's Wild Atlantic Way, and really puts the Skelligs into another place when it comes to natural history.